Dear Ms. Yang, we can start now. So time.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. We already have about over 120 participants. Thank you so much, distinguished guests, colleagues. My name is Xiaohong Yang, the new Chief Thematic Officer for ADB. Last week, our President Asakawa opened our first SDG dialogue, a decade of action enabling the SDGs. So he gave us a very good direction on how could ADB help our DMCs to achieve the SDGs. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this very first series of localizing SDG roundtables. These dialogues aim at promoting learning, reflection, sharing practical solutions, finding new ways of working together to help our DMCs to achieve the SDGs. Today's roundtable is jointly hosted by ADB, UNDP, OECD, and DLOG. Thanks so much for all of you today. It is a great joint effort to make it happen. First, let me invite Dr. Jekyll Seniors to speak. Dr. Jekyll is currently the manager UNDP Regional Hub for Asia and Pacific, located in Bangkok. Prior to this position, he served as Chief Regional Policy and Program Support for Asia and Pacific, Country Director for UNDP India, and Deputy Resident Representative in Uzbekistan. Over to you, Dr. Jekyll. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yang. And let me first of all just say also thank you to Mr. Sosantono and to Mr. Kim also for this opportunity to share this opening remarks with them, but also to all the partners, specifically ADB, DeLong and OECD, for this opportunity to speak on a topic that is really important and very valuable to the work that UNDP does across the world. What we've really realized is that COVID-19 has reminded us how important it is to look at local governments and also to see the important role that they play in providing services, informing citizens, mobilize resources through different funding streams, but also coordinate with central governments and with other institutions throughout countries. For UNDP, the development must really be locally grounded, and that's why this SDG localization efforts are such an important priority within our efforts. Specifically, if we think about the important theme of leaving no one behind, which is central to the SDGs and also what many of us here in the room would want to see happen by the end of 2030. This means that we really need to go beyond integrating the global goals into local development and investment plans. And we must incentivize public and private stakeholders, many of you are in the room today, to participate, to innovate, to finance, and to co-design the solutions that can really promote SDG localizations. Therefore, we look at this as a whole of society approach. If our local governments, if our local institutions, if our local communities are not involved within this process, we will never be able to achieve the SDGs. And I would like to thank everybody for also taking this initiative forward and over the next 4 days, talking about really important areas that needs to be addressed in all of our development work. UNDP has, through its efforts and localizations, really understood that 5 areas are critical for us to achieve success. The first is really that we need to look at innovation for local communities and to how
Hello, Dr. Jekyll, cannot hear you. Unmute yourself.
Hi, Ms. Yang. I think we lost the speaker, but we will try to get him reconnected again later on in the program.
Okay, while we're waiting for him, maybe we give him a few minutes. Otherwise, we will move to next speaker, Mr. Kim. Are you there, Mr. Kim?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Oh, very
I'm
good.
ready.
Let's start. Yeah. Good. Let's start you. Then if he is back, we can turn him back. So Dr. Kim is the chairman OECD Network on Physical Relations and president of the Physical Policy Institute. Mr. Kim is the president, also working for the Physical Policy Institute in Seoul, Korea. And he also served as the VP of Korea Institute of Public Finance. Over to you, Dr. Kim. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Very glad to see you all. On behalf of the OECD, I'm pleased to welcome you all to the Joint Localizing SDS Week and today's webinar on multi-level governance, policy coherence, and institutional development. I would like to thank the ADB, UNDP, and NULOG for their strong cooperation for this event. Myself, I serve as the chair of the OECD Network on Fiscal Relations across levels of government, where we look at the challenges of strengthening capacity across levels of government and have examined how subnational governments can advance with the sustainable development goals. In previous work with the ADB and KIPF, we have organized an Asian roundtable on fiscal relations across levels of government, which culminated in our most recent OECD Fiscal Federalism Report, Local Public Finance and Capacity Building in Asia. Strengthening institutional capacity and policy frameworks with formal and clear assignment of functions, mandates, responsibilities, and incentives is critical for effective decentralization in implementing the SDGs at subnational levels. Subnational engagement and the alignment of priorities and coordinated action at different levels of government is a key component of policy coherence for sustainable development. Responsibility for a significant share of spending has been mandated to subnational governments across Asia, which are primarily dependent on fiscal transfers to fulfill these mandates. There's growing experience that attaching positive incentives to transfers can hold promise for promoting better local service delivery performance and accountability, and hence for attaining the SDGs, not only to improve well-being and boost equity. These are all issues that we address in our recent OECD Fiscal Federalism Report. The COVID-19 pandemic has triggered an unprecedented public health crisis with stark social consequences and huge economic cost. To address these challenges, it is fundamental that we improve intergovernmental coordination. The capacities of local governments will therefore be key to an effective response to ensure that measures reach all regions within countries. The complex and multidimensional policy issues at stake concerning fiscal relations call for exactly this type of horizontal and vertical approach. Indeed, most OECD countries have involved regional and local levels of government to prepare national SDG strategies, action plans, or voluntary national reviews to promote coherence in implementation. Several OECD countries have created new mechanisms or institutions for coordination between national, regional, and local levels of government as part of the national strategies for SDG implementation. The OECD Council recommendation on policy coherence for sustainable development can also support governments in promoting synergies among national, regional, and local policies. The recommendation provides a comprehensive standard to help equip policymakers with the necessary institutional mechanisms and tools for enhancing policy coherence in SDG implementation. In the next few days, we will hear from a number of OECD colleagues from the Center for Cities and Regions, Isabel Chapli, Stefano Marta, and Paolo Beneri, who work to support financing, implementation, and monitoring of SDGs. Notably, the OECD UCLG World Observatory on Subnational Government Finance and Investment represents a unique tool to assess the fiscal capacity of subnational governments to finance the SDGs. It is a global platform that provides comparable data and information on political, fiscal, and financial decentralization in more than 120 countries, including 16 countries of the Asia-Pacific region. The World Observatory offers a unique overview of countries' subnational expenditure, investment, revenue, and debt. As such, it also contributes to the work of the OECD Fiscal Network, such as the new report I just highlighted on capacity building in Asia, which extensively used the data. Tomorrow, Isabel Chapli will explain how the World Observatory can help improve fiscal decentralization frameworks to support the implementation of the SDGs at the local level and inform international dialogue and decision-making on this crucial topic. The OECD has also recently initiated a territorial approach to the SDGs, which aims to support the cities and regions in developing, implementing, and monitoring strategies to achieve the SDGs. It provides local governments with a number of instruments, including specific indicators to measure where they stand compared to other cities and regions, and provides a platform for sharing best practices and dialogue among peers. The OECD is looking forward to continue working with you to design, develop, and deliver better fiscal policies for better lives. I wish you all a fruitful and insightful set of webinars. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. Now I think Dr. Jacko is back. Can you hear us, Dr. Jacko? Over to you.
Yes, colleagues, and just to say sorry about that. Sorry about the difficulty there with the technology. Thank you again. Just to say that that the 5 areas where we really wanted to focus in on was one on innovation. That we also need to find new ways of unlocking opportunities for communities to be actively engaged. And as we mentioned, we will hear from that throughout the 4 days. Also around data, how people share and how local communities also get information about development decisions is crucial for how they can also make informed decisions to meet the sustainable development goals. The third one, which we'll also hear a lot around during the next 4 days, is around financing, how to also maximize communities' involvement in financing opportunities and unlocking new opportunities. In UNDP, for instance, we see that opportunities around Islamic financing are opening up, which really contributes to local governments and also to localizing the SDG very successfully. And then lastly, also around multi-stakeholder and engagement at the policy level. There's a common saying that if people and communities weigh in, they will buy in, and governments need to listen to the voices of local communities wherever possible to also make sure that the policy decisions and the programming interventions really benefit people at all levels. And I think through these mechanisms, through really addressing it at all levels of society, one can meet the sustainable development goals, but there again, the recognition of how important local communities are really needs to be recognized. And we look forward to the debate here. As was mentioned, we look forward to solutions as well, and also how we can apply that throughout our work. And once again, thank you very much to everybody participating, as well as to our partners. Back to you, Mrs. Jan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jacko. Now we are delighted to have our Vice President, Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development, Dr. Susantono, to join us. I believe our VP doesn't need any introduction. So without further ado, I will ask our VP to provide keynote speeches. Over to you, VP, please.
Thank you, Xiaohong. Dr. Jacko Cilliers, UNDP, Dr. Jung-Hun Kim, OECD, distinguished panelists, guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to speak at these opening sessions of the virtual roundtable series to explore how to localize the SDGs of Sustainable Development Goal. We need to create an enabling environment in which subnational and local governments can meaningfully contribute to achieving SDG targets in Asia and the Pacific. The Decade of Actions, announced in September 2019, calls for accelerating sustainable solutions to challenges ranging from poverty and gender to climate change, inequality, and closing the finance gap. This ambitious worldwide effort works on 3 levels: globally, locally, and at the personal level. It remains to be the global roadmap for sustainable and inclusive development. And amid this pandemic, the SDGs are more relevant than ever and provide the very framework for recovery. ADB is committed to support its developing members achieve the SDGs. Our approach is to align ADB Strategy 2030 and its operational priorities with the SDGs, whether through providing direct project financing, mobilizing additional finance, supporting knowledge and capacity building, or working in partnership with others. This may include project links to SDGs, country partnership strategies reflecting national SDG priorities, mobilizing SDG finance through projects, and providing targeted technical assistance. The devastating impact of the pandemic is leaving some deep scars in the Asia and Pacific region's growth and development. Estimated economic losses worldwide reached 4.8 trillion to 7.4 trillion in 2020, with developing Asia accounting for about 20% of the total. And by the end of 2020, some 78 million more people had found themselves below the $1.90 a day poverty line. It is clear that we must move urgently to pursue more sustainable and inclusive development strategies that allow communities to weather this kind of shocks. What will the recovery from the COVID-19 look like? Some economists are hoping for a quick V-shaped recovery, while others have warned of slower swoosh-shaped or U-shaped rebound. Today, yet another possibility is emerging, that of a K-shaped recovery. The K-shaped recovery is characterized by a stark split in the recovery pace of the economy. Some sectors are bouncing back ahead of the rest at a much faster pace, while others are continuing a downward trajectory. This split in the recovery pace, therefore, resembles the letter K. The pandemic is also threatening to deepen the divide between developed and developing countries and cause greater economic divergence within the countries in the regions, in part as a result of inequitable digitalizations. Sectors that strategically and effectively adopt digital initiatives will likely see their profits pointing upwards. Online interactivities through mobile apps or websites are occupying more space in our daily life in this age of social distancing and COVID-19 measures. Companies that are able to meet their customer needs through digital services will likely reap the benefits from both increased patronage and cost savings. Meanwhile, developing countries, smaller businesses, and poorer communities have had more difficulties adapting to the dramatic and transformative digital leap that has been witnessed since the pandemic. But harnessing digitalization, expanding access to technology, and improving digital literacy will all be critical for avoiding the K-shaped recovery. Localizing the SDG is another important and crucial prerequisite for a successful pandemic recovery and for returning to a path capable for achieving the SDGs. About 2/3 of the 169 SDG targets involve subnational governments. They also account for nearly a quarter of total public spending and more than a third of public investment. Education, social protection, health, and other public services are the primary areas of subnational government spending that link closely with the SDGs. Localization is critically important in our regions. The mega trends of rapid urbanizations, climate response, population growth, and demographic change are just some of the challenges. Last year, we saw the importance of subnational and local governments in containing the spread of COVID-19, getting relief to those in need, and keeping essential services functioning. Yet, we need a better enabling environment that allows subnational governments to better contribute to national SDG agendas. This involves 4 key elements. First is strengthening institution and policy coherence across government. Second is finance. Third is keeping tabs on what is happening through effective data collection and monitoring. And finally, ensuring we engage with all stakeholders, develop partnerships, and share knowledge. That is exactly why these roundtables can add value. So let me briefly expand on these 4 elements. First, we must strengthen institutions and ensure coherent policies. A 2019 report by United Cities and local government found that despite effort to clarify the allocation of responsibility, there remain significant overlaps between different levels of government in many countries in Asia and the Pacific. Much remains to be done to help our developing members align the legal, institutional, and fiscal dimensions of their decentralization framework, while at the same time reduce constraints on building technical and management capacity. Second, subnational government finance must be robust, sustainable, and predictable. Mobilizing financing remains a major challenge. Debt risk was already rising in many developing countries prior to the pandemic. The fiscal stimulus response was appropriate, but exacerbated the state of those with high debt and low revenue. Several developing Asian countries do not meet the threshold 15% of GDP tax yield, which is now widely regarded as the minimum required for sustainable development. Developing countries in our region must urgently expand their tax base. Increasing domestic resource mobilization is one of ADB's priority. We support tax system reform and enforcement and more equitable intergovernmental fiscal transfer system. In September 2020 last year, ADB President Asakawa called for the establishment of an Asia-Pacific tax hub to strengthen mobilization and facilitate international tax cooperations among our countries in collaboration with other development partners. Increasingly, private investment must help finance the SDG agenda. This requires a conducive investment climate within an appropriate regulatory framework and effective government oversight. Standards on the quality, inclusiveness, and reliability of services are needed to ensure safety as well as social and environmental protection. Innovative financing mechanisms are essential, like how philanthropic organizations can play an increasingly prominent role in supporting the SDGs. Third, we must combine different approaches to better track progress on SDGs. On the one hand, we must not forget that public statistic system will remain key. On the other hand, for a more granular data at the subnational level can be gathered through community-based approaches. In Asia and the Pacific, many of our countries have made huge strides in the past few years to improve the quality and the quantity of national level data, particularly creating gender disaggregated data sets and more precise subnational information. To support this trend, ADB recently started a Data for Development initiative to build more granular data that are relevant to the SDGs and working closely with the national statistical offices. Finally, to ensure that no one is left behind, we must further expand and deepen partnership among all stakeholders at all levels, both within and outside the country. Civil society, academia, and the private sector all play critical roles in accelerating SDG implementations. With financing needs too large to be shouldered by the public sector alone, private sector partnership will only grow in importance, as shown in our recent assessment of development finance in Kazakhstan. We are beginning to see more evidence that localized approach to SDGs is an effective strategy. The United States and local government report in 2019, for example, has argued that the systematic sharing of knowledge and lessons learned among countries hold considerable potential to accelerate localized SDG initiatives. In ADB's collaborative work with the United Nations and other partners on regional policy dialogues on SDG, we are also increasingly stressing the importance of the localizations. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, more than 1 year on, we know that the pandemic has most likely worsened Asia and Pacific countries' prospect of meeting their SDG targets. The challenges have become greater and urgent actions are on call, but there is cause for optimism too. Let us remind ourselves how in the past year, thanks to the global partnership and collaboration, the world has made unprecedented progress in development, production, and dissemination of the COVID-19 vaccines, not just one, but several. Together with all of you, we remain committed to supporting our developing members localize and accelerate the SDG implementations. I believe that it is only through multi-stakeholders and multilateral cooperations that we can forge the right path needed to advance the 2030 agenda. This series of roundtable is just the beginnings of ADB knowledge event and partnership to support localizing SDGs. Thank you very much, and I wish you all an interesting and fruitful next 4 days. Thank you, and back to you, Xiao.
Thank you so much, VP, and thank you so much for championing the very important SDG localization subject. And thank you for helping us set up the context and highlighting all the 4 core areas. That's very important. And now we can move on to the second session. Before we start the second session on the panel 1, I'd like to have Ms. Rashana to put up some housekeeping rules for all of you. And Rashana, please put up the slide. Yes. So can I over to you to let everybody knows the housekeeping rules? Thank you, Rashana.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Thank you, everyone, for your time and for participating. This is very encouraging to see you all. Very quickly on the house rules. For presenters, we have allocated 10 minutes for each panelist. So appreciate if you could keep it to the time so that we have time for interactions at the end. And also, please, for participants, we aim to have an open discussion. So please indicate your name and organization in keeping with the spirit of openness and transparency. We have actually, arranged that the questions and comments can only be raised through the chat box. So please write your name and organization you represent, and be specific to which presenters your question is directed to. And also, please keep questions short and straightforward. This will allow us to include more participation during the question and answer. I would also like to add that, if the questions are not answered during the webinar, due to the paucity of time, we would request the panelists to respond to these on a later time. So thank you so much. And this is all. Now over to you, Ms. Yang.
Thank you so much. This is very nice. So let me just first, I'm delighted to introduce the distinguished speakers to this panel 1 session. Our first speaker is Dr. Patrick. He will set the context of SDG localization. Dr. Patrick is Regional Advisor, Lead Governance and SDG Localization, UNDP Hub for Asia and Pacific. Mr. Patrick leads the localization SDG work. He has over 20 years experience working in 26 different countries. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Patrick. The floor is yours.
Colleagues, I just want to make sure that you can see my screen and that you hear me properly.
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice President, colleagues from DELOG and OECD, colleagues from Asia and the Pacific. A very good morning, afternoon, and evening for those joining us from the Pacific. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. And for us, as Jaco Sillers from UNDP just mentioned, it's very important that we meet, that we share our experience, that we discuss, but we learn, right, among ourselves as to how SDG localization is happening in this region. We have all seen the importance of cities and local governments during this pandemic, either in terms of providing services, putting regulations, but as the Vice President reminded us, the importance of local governments to ensure that people will not fall back into poverty beyond the $1.9 threshold, right? So this is extremely important. Let's don't forget that the heart of the SDGs is this ambition that we all have to leave no one behind. With this, I've been asked for this first session and to help contextualize a little bit the forthcoming days, to share a little bit of the reflections that we had within UNDP, but also with our stakeholders and of course ADB and OECD and DELOG on what SDG localization entails in this region. And I will start by sharing some very general remarks just to refresh ourselves a little bit, and then zoom in a little bit in what we call the 4+1 enablers that we have presented in 2018 during a symposium in Cambodia on SDG localization. So my first slide here, and I'm using this picture that you see in the background, a massive urban development while still having a very important slum in the first part of this picture, is to remind us of leaving no one behind, right? The SDGs, as we all know, are important because we have this ambition of being inclusive, but we also have to look at it as a new opportunity and a unique opportunity to rethink inclusive and sustainable development at the territorial level. We all know that there are pockets of poverty within countries that need to be addressed, and those pockets of poverty really require tailored and ad hoc interventions, right? Where, of course, not only shall we look at government response, but we have to look at a whole of society approach, as the Vice President and the colleagues from the OECD mentioned. We also need to remind ourselves that leaving no one behind really requires us to go beyond our traditional siloed and vertical approaches to addressing development, right? We know that the local development challenges are all interrelated and complex and requires really new approach to addressing local development challenges using, for instance, system approach. But this is something we'll be discussing in a few minutes. And then again, the importance of a whole of society approach, not only to engage everyone, and I appreciate again the point mentioned by the Vice President by saying, it needs to be an individual commitment, but also a new ways to engage and deliver, but also finance the SDGs, which is something we will be addressing in the coming days. So if we look a little bit at our region, what we clearly know is that sustainable development remains fragile. Growth is unfortunately unevenly distributed, right? And we know that by 2026, 50% of the Asian population will be living in cities, right? 50% of the population. What we've also seen is the vulnerability of cities and local governments when it comes to shocks, either financial shocks, but also climate and disaster shocks, right? And the figure that I'd like to draw your attention here is this figure of 5 billion back in 1970, which has now rocked up to $75 billion of economic loss related to disaster, and of course, disaster impacting the most vulnerable populations, either in rural areas, but also in cities. And again, just to mention very rapidly here, the important role of cities to prevent people to fall back into poverty, specifically in this pandemic context. Now, if we look at the complexity of the SDGs, I'd like to share this slide, which basically shows how complicated it is to address, for instance, something that Vice President mentioned about education in this region. Under the MDGs, right, despite massive efforts of our countries in this region, we all know that still, not all the children were able to enroll. And this is not because of lack of investments, but it really looks, and it really calls us to reconsider what are the key bottlenecks that affect, a parent from not sending a little girl to school. And if you look here, you realize that, for this little girl to go to school, not only had we have to build schools, provide textbook and recruit teachers, but we had to look at the whole ecosystem, provide resources for the family, work on gender issues, ensure that adequate social safety nets were put in place, ensure that adequate regulations were put in place to allow this little girl to go to schools, and also to have the right investments to be able to facilitate the transportation, but also most likely the fact that this girl in Cambodia would need to stay in a dormitory, right? So out of this approach, you realize that 13 institutions, in this case in Cambodia, had to be mobilized, covering more or less 8 SDGs. Now, what are we looking at here? Is it complexity or is it confusion? Well, this is a little bit provocative, but what we believe is that we need to change in the way we are addressing our development work at the subnational level. Clearly, we should no longer plan, budget, and work in silo. The importance of vertical and policy coherence is critical, right? We need to ensure that subnational governments are operating in line with national priorities, that they're operating within the decentralization framework that the country has, and that they also have, of course, the right fiscal resources, either from intergovernmental fiscal resource, top down, but also the fiscal space to be able to operate. What we also believe is the importance to look at a system approach, right? From the slide that I've previously shared, and that we really use innovation, social innovation in particular, but also digital, as the Vice President mentioned, to basically build new partnership, but also provide services, be able to listen to citizens' needs more accurately, and have a better cooperation and work on trust between citizens and governments at all levels. And this brings us to this last point, which is about putting up platforms and creating portfolios to really engage with a whole set of actors differently and build cooperations between public and private stakeholders. Now, this is what we've basically identified and shared at our regional symposium in Cambodia in 2018. And most of the partners today were, some of them I'm pretty sure were part of that event in Siem Reap. Out of a regional study that UNDP has conducted, we've identified what we call the 4+1 enablers to SDG localization. And we're very proud and happy that this framework is going to be used today and over the next 4 days to structure the conversation that we're having. The first enabler that we think important is the whole focus on policy coherence, but also looking at the decentralization and the local governance environment, right? We know that subnational governments need to operate in a coordinated manner, in a framework that is led by governments and provincial authorities. And we also know here the importance of having clear decentralization process in place. Very often what we see in this region is that countries have adopted decentralization laws, either political decentralization, administrative and fiscal decentralization, but we still see in a few occasions that these reforms need to be further implemented, right? That the functional assignments between central government and provincial government and local government very often needs to be further clarified. Fiscal resources need to be aligned to those functions, and this is something that is extremely important. We've also, the second enabler is very much around data. Now, on data, of course, there's this whole importance of using national statistics data, national data. But we also know that the more granular you go, the more local you go, the less data you have. And it's also very important here that we see how we can complement the national statistic data with other source of data, either be community-based data, and we have our colleagues from the Philippines that will be speaking about this, I think on the third day, but also how can we use, for instance, digital data, big data, to better understand what people need and how they address services and so forth. So data is extremely important. We also have this critical issue on SDG 16, where, as you know, we don't yet have all the mechanisms, even the methodologies in terms of identifying the right indicators at that subnational level. The third enabler is around multi-stakeholder partnership, really here engaging society beyond the traditional way and the way we've been doing it for the last 20 or 30 years, but really looking at civil society and the private sector as actor of changes, right? They are not only the beneficiaries or the one that we listen to, but how do we really engage them to deliver things? But how do we also involve them in understanding what their needs are, what their concerns are, and where are those win-win strategies that we're looking at? And finally, SDG financing, going beyond intergovernmental fiscal transfers, looking at how we operate and leverage the fiscal space at the subnational level. How do we bring in private sectors? I know that ADB is working very much on public-private partnership, but how do we bring new financing there? Also looking at, as Jaco, my colleague, has just mentioned, for instance, Islamic finance, crowdsourcing, and other source of financing. And then at the heart of it, and this is the +1 enabler that we've mentioned, is the whole focus on innovation, bringing social innovation and digital tools for better accountability, to better listen to people, but also better deliver. My last slide is focusing on the importance of platforms, which is really this whole concept and notion of a multi and a whole of society approach. What we believe in UNDP is that at the subnational level, if we really want to localize the SDGs in an effective and in an inclusive manner, we really need to find those platforms that allow citizens, vulnerable groups, the private sector, the government at subnational, but also at local level, the academia, etc., to find a space to be able to contribute, to share their concerns, but also discuss how collectively they can contribute to a sustainable change. And I'm delighted to see that, and in the fourth day, excuse me, we will have the contribution and the presentation of the Ministry of Villages from the government of Indonesia, who will be presenting one of the experimentation that we are having with them around the use of social innovation platforms to basically help structure and provide the space for dialogues and to co-create solution at the local level. So with this, let me end here. And I, of course, will be happy to take questions towards the end of this panel. Back to you, Mrs. Yang. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patrick. We all understand to help the little girl to go to school, we really need to work on localizing SDGs, and we need to do things differently, as you highlighted, and then to work on the innovation and 4+1 enablers. Our next speaker is Dr. Balandia. Dr. Balandia is Secretary General, United Cities and Local Governments of Asia Pacific. And she is the first woman Secretary General in her position. She is an active member of UN Habitat, and she received her PhD degree in urban engineering from the University of Tokyo, and she has over 15 years experience in urban development and SDG. Thank you, Dr. Balandia. Over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very good morning, very good afternoon. Greetings from UCAG ASPAC Secretariat in Jakarta. And I'm so happy that we can meet again in these important discussions on the localization of SDGs that we all been working on. And thanks again to the organizers, ADB, UNDP, and OECD for inviting me to this important gathering. I'm here representing this Association of Cities and Local Governments, or UCAG ASPAC. This is actually the largest regional section of UCAG, which we facilitate the major stakeholders of local authorities within the United Nations. The topic I like to share here, maybe can we show slide second, slide 2? Yes, please, thank you. So the topic that I like to share today is about the subnational governments' perspectives on localizing SDGs in the Asia Pacific region. I am so happy that previous speakers, Vice President Bambang, and also UNDP colleagues have mentioned the importance of local government. So I don't need to convince everyone here in the session on the role of subnational governments in the SDGs localizations. So our constituency of local and regional governments see the SDGs as more than just a list of goals. This represents a big opportunity to renew the social contracts and also to rethink the relationship, not just among space of governments, but also among civil society, our communities, and all stakeholders. I will just later on give you examples on this, how local governments have been working on the localization of SDGs. This is why our constituency is calling on the international community to enable the localization of SDGs. Yeah? Because it's, as we know, local governments, we are not just mere implementers of the agenda, but the catalyst of change. So here, I'm also happy that previous speakers also mentioned the importance of enabling environments. But before I mention on this, let me just share again the definitions, what we put by SDGs localizations. This is the process of defining, implementing, and monitoring strategies at the local level. But of course, we have to also value the local context and also understand the local wisdom as well for achieving the global, national, and subnational sustainable development goals and targets. Yeah? So it's a process. This is a process from involvement of subnational governments and stakeholders in defining priorities, and building strategies, implementation, of course, and following up and assessment to create a full local ownership. I think this is also important that we have to understand that SDGs are not something that are new, but this is actually building also what the priorities, the uniqueness of local governments or cities based on the context. So we are essential actor in the localization of SDGs. So for effective SDGs localizations, we really need to have a very good enabling environment. We have done a survey almost more than 24 countries in Asia Pacific on the enabling environments available. That include also fiscal decentralization that we previous speakers also mentioned, the importance of having capacity development for local governments, and also important of having access to data and integrated information systems. So this has been also reviewed, and of course, looking at the legal aspect as well. I think you will hear later on from different speakers how different governments, I mean the central governments have put in SDGs localization. So in the slide 3 and the next slides, several tools have been produced and have been introduced. This slide shows the simple roadmap for individual. On the top one is individual local governments, and the bottom one is for local government association, because we see individual local governments and then association of local governments play a certain role in this localization of SDGs. So political commitment of leaders, availability of data, coordination of different units within local governments, and development of action plans and financial options. These also include the creation of task force on dealing with SDGs localization. So on the next slides, the primary responsibilities, I think we have to be clear what could be the roles of different stakeholders here. I'm talking about local actors that comprises also of local governments, community, as well as the business and industries groups. So we have different role to play, and this should be also clearly understood by different actors in this regards. So in the next slide, we know that the pandemic situation changed really the scheme of development. We of course notice also in the previous APFSG, we see some progress, but we also see some deviation of this progress. It's stagnant and also off track, and there are on track goals. So in this pandemic situation, the localization of this is continuous, even as there are shifts in local government's priorities due to significant budget cuts in response to COVID, and also recover from the COVID impact of pandemic. So like several local governments lost almost 50%, more than 50% of their local revenue. And this is not only in one country, but there are several countries that facing this situation. So this graph shows just an example from Indonesia. This is also actually was shared in a previous web share that we organized under UCLG ASPAC for Indonesian local governments, where local governments need to refocus their programs and reallocate their budget to attain the short-term development. This is just showing you the short-term developments, which of course also contribute to the SDG. So in the next slides, there are several fundamental aspects to support and encourage local governments in achieving SDGs target. Yeah. Strengthen the localization policies in national SDG strategies by creating a good enabling environment to mobilize local governments and support, of course, from different communities. So one of the VNRs coming from a country, I don't need to mention the country's name here, the SDGs agenda is stronger if localization is stronger. So I think this is a clear message that came on this VNR 2020. So establishing as many as possible a knowledge hub and coordination platform to provide the best practices, alternatives, and cooperation opportunities for subnational governments. I think next speaker, Bu Vivi, will also be sharing on this. So important also channeling with private sectors, philanthropy foundations, and also sustaining to sustain the SDGs targets effort. So providing training and capacity building. So, and here I will also share with you what progress we have in terms of localization SDGs by having what we call it VLRs. In the next slide, you can see VLRs and as well as VSRs. This is VLR stands for voluntary local review and VSR stands for voluntary subnational review, and how we facilitating also the development of VNR. So here several cities or local governments use VLR as also a baseline and also monitor on the progress, and also use this VLR also to have a better coordination with different units inside the local government. So in the next slide here, we have seen also increasing interest of cities and local governments in producing VLR, and we are now working on the VSR, voluntary subnational review, in which we engage with associations, and this is a group of local governments in which we are using it as the reference to the VNR that the government is preparing. Yeah, this is also we have been having a good coordination with Bappenas on this. So here in the picture show that the engagement of local governments in the VNR processes actually has not been so promising. Of course, there is a bit increase compared to the previous VNR submissions, but here I think then the number is still considered quite low, which is 50, around 55. Yeah. So in the last slides, let me just conclude by saying that we need a greater participation of local and regional governments in reporting and follow-up mechanism. I'm very happy that several central governments have been also been committed in engaging local governments in the VNR processes. I'm referring by not having a weak consultations, but also having a stronger consultation, not just putting a reference in the VNR, but also engaging them in the process. So make localization of SDGs as essential part of national strategies. This require, of course, good coordination and collaboration mechanism. And this also, we need to back localizations effort with adequate means of implementation, including access to finance. But we also see that different country has a different regulation, different legal frameworks that we also have to understand. And it's not going to be easy to change those regulations that are not in favor of local authorities. So our advocacy is a continuing this, and then this is why we need to have support bottom-up monitoring processes through PLRs as well as VSRs, and boost international cooperation and multi-stakeholder partnership for SDGs localization. So we are local governments, and in conclusion, local and regional governments are already walking the talk. We are the human face of SDGs. We provide services on water, decent job, fighting climate change. But this is why we call to strengthen our involvement in the achievement of SDGs by harnessing the powers of local and regional governments. So we know national governments are committed to SDGs, but it is only by co-creation, by co-creating among all spheres of government that we will achieve the change that we want to see in the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balandia. I think we already see a lot of questions towards you in the chat box. And thank you for walking us through. And then will be great to learn about your experience on the VNR, VLI, etc., because you are the practitioner there. So our next speaker is Dr. Vivi. She will speak Indonesia's experience in achieving its SDG agenda. She is a senior advisor to the Minister of Planning for Social Affairs and Poverty Reduction and head of Indonesia SDG Secretariat. So in her current role, she is advising the minister on social and poverty reduction related policies and strategies. She also needs SDG work, and she has great experience in designing a lot of poverty reduction programs in Indonesia. She holds PhD in planning and development from University of South California. Over to you, Dr. Vivi. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yang, distinguished Mr. VP, distinguished panelists, and also ladies and gentlemen. Very good afternoon, good evening, and also good morning. Thank you also for having me in this important webinar. Let me start the slide since the time is taking. Can you see?
Yes, we do. Very well.
Okay. We are aware that SDGs is an ambitious agenda and can be only achieved through collaborations among all the stakeholders and also do in a systematic approach. So in Indonesia case, we start to enact the presidential decree as a basis for the SDGs implementations, and then try to mainstream the SDGs in the planning documents, national as well as the local level, and then try to build all the instruments that need to ensure the participatory process, clear and measurable goals and indicators, and then converge the source of the funding, and then build some instruments to monitor and evaluate, and also building a communicative strategy. To ensure the policy coherence, since last 5 years plan period, we actually already mainstreaming the SDGs into the development agenda. So this is the scheme for the current midterm development plan, which has 7 priorities of development agenda. Within each priorities, we map all the goals of the SDGs as well as the indicators. So in the RPGMN, the Midterm Development Plan 2020-2024, around 124 SDGs indicators are already in use or in line with the indicators for the Midterm Development Plan. The instruments that we built to mainstream in order to make it operationalized is several steps. First is to develop the SDGs action plan along the line with the midterm development plan, which is 5 years plan. We established the SDGs action plan that consists of the action plan from the government and the non-government. So there are a couple of formats, the formats for the government, the national government, and then the local governments, also the formats of the action plan for the philanthropy and business actors, as well as the CSOs and the media, I mean the non-state actors that directly or indirectly support the achievement of the 2030 agenda. in the SDGs action plan at the subnational level, we only have a provincial level, but the process of development of the SDGs at the subnational level involve all districts or municipals as well as other stakeholders in the area. So currently we have 29 subnational action plans in complementing the SDGs national action plan. We develop also several guidance for developing the action plan, and then the metadata indicators. We just issued the second edition of the metadata indicators. Now we have like 289 indicators that already align with the global standard. And then like Patrick and several panelists mentioned, we utilize all these instruments at the local level. You've heard that we now develop an initiative by the Ministry for Villages to localizing not only at the subnational level, but now going forward to the village, to the community level. Yeah. So again, the challenge is how to elaborate all the indicators that we have at the national, at the provincial level, somehow at the outcome level, now really linked to the output level at the village level. In addition to this, the Financial Service Authority already issued the regulation for having a sustainability report for the financial institution and the listed firm. So now we already have like more than 100 sustainability report for the listed firms. This is the items or activities that can be done in the each platform of the SDGs. First, on the government and the parliament, like I've already explained, at the national level, we set up the indicators, target and objective, and then also some regulation, design the systematic way how to retrieve all the data from the Central Bureau of Statistics that can be used for other technical ministries as well as the local governments, and then try to also converge other data from other sources like from the local level. So besides the things that I already mentioned, now we have or working together with the universities to develop what we call as an SDG centers. Currently, there are 23 universities at the local that established the SDG center. This hub is collaborate further with other platform at the local level, be it at, with the businesses, the CSOs, the medias, and also other experts. We also work together with the businesses, not only for the action plan, but also to monitor using the GRI standard, as well as facilitate building a capacity building. So currently we just launched an SDGs Academy to be a melting pot to disseminate all these instruments and move forward together with also the businesses. Of course, the partnership principles, that's part of the our guidance to ensure the participation of all platforms of the SDGs work well. This is another example that how we explore as well as building a commitment and collaborations in financing. So beside the conventional financing, we are now exploring the innovative financing, try to explore more the private sector as a missing piece of the SDG puzzle, meaning how to collaborate with them, not only in activities in plan, but also to finance all the activities in order to close the gap, all the targets and indicators toward the 2030 agenda. So here are some examples that we are now exploring in order to develop further for the SDGs financing hub. This is only one of the example that I want to share about the cooperation between the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources with the provincial government of the East Nusa Tenggara. This is one of the remote and also poor regions who works well with the district government of Sumba, so one of the district there. Also work together with the state electricity enterprise, the NGOs in Sumba, and also the international NGOs, as well as other development partners in this regard, the ADB and the Norwegian embassy. So this is the effort how to develop clean resources in these remote places. So by supported by all these stakeholders, we could develop around more than 4,000 households now have an electricity access by providing a solar power plant, some units of wind power plants, as well as biogas that installed in the household. And of course, several others infrastructures and also trainings, how to build the capacity to really operationalize not only the method, but also providing an impact for the community. This is some impacts on the health conditions. So example here, the most worst condition on the health is on the red eyes, because in the previous without electricity, they just burn the traditional ones, and also there are some impacts on some health sickness, yeah, including the asthma, the coughing, the diarrhea, and other health problem. The other good impact is on the welfare by having a saving time in harvesting the corn, in which previously take like 3 to 4 hours, now reduced from 92% the time only 12%, and it's increased the income of the household from the previously 100 to 200 a day, now almost double a day. In this regard, they have an extra time to have more time to weave. This is a traditional which is very precious in the area. So it makes them to have more income, and it is for sure have an reduce the carbon dioxide emissions, and also of course contributing to the renewable energy strategy for Indonesia. I think that's all that I want to share. We'll have more time for discussion further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vivi. We really like your presentation. It makes us to really see the real good samples. And then happy to see that Indonesia has owned the SDGs, and you have put it in your budget. You have taken it so seriously, and you gave us a very good samples how you were able to achieve the fantastic results on the ground. And we are very impressed about how you can put those clear and predictable 289 indicators, and then you have the right policy framework, everything in place. We'll be very happy to see more how you gone through the process, align the policies with this shared perspective. Very, very interesting sample. Our last but not least speaker is Dr. Rafi Shea. He is a Special Secretary Planning and the Development in Government of Sin. So he represents a subnational government, a province. So Dr. Shea has a very good diverse experience in managing public services. In many projects, he's leading the implementation SDG in Sin province. He received his Master in Public Policy from Australia National University and postgraduate degree on Business Administration from the Institute of Business Administration, or IBA, of Karachi. The floor is yours, Dr. Shea. Could you upload your screen, so your slides, so we can see it on your screen? Dr. Shea, over to you. Maybe you can start, given the time constraint, Dr. Shea, while we're waiting for you uploading the screen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the organizer for providing me this opportunity to share my experience with distinguished guests, panelists, and colleagues from different parts of the world. Good evening, good morning. Hope I'm being heard.
We have hard time to hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes, now better. Please go ahead.
Hi.
Hi, Rafiq. This is Carlo from the IT department. Can you switch off your camera? Let's see if that will help. Sorry about this.
So meantime, while we're waiting for Mr. Shea, because we are already, overflowed our time, so behind the schedule, could you also could I ask Mr. Christian from DLOG to read some of the questions from the floor? I have seen a lot of questions already. So while we are fixing the problems of Dr. Shea's screen, probably we can start a Q&A a little bit, so we can also wait for him. Agree, Christian? Could you read out? Thank you. Over to you.
Yes. Thanks, Ms. Yang. It's a pleasure. There are already some questions coming in, and I have one question which I'd like to direct to Patrick Duang, and it's a question of Varis Minai, and the question is following. I would like to ask you about the multi-stakeholders engagement, specifically the engagement of private sector in least developing countries. How could they best be mobilized and assured that investing in SDGs will benefit them in the long run? Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Christian. I don't know if you hear me.
Well, we do.
Thank you. A very interesting question. Thank you very much. Well, what we now see is, and this is what I was referring earlier to, trying to establish at that local level the right space. We call this platform these days. I mean, they don't necessarily need to be digital platform, but a place for the private sector to engage with the government and with the local communities. So what we've identified here is that if we come with a solid vision of what territorial development is, and if we manage to, from the early stage, to bring in the private sector, so that the private sector is not only seen as the one that is going to help with investments, but really sees their role as in a win-win situation. Let me give you an example, for instance. many of the private sectors today are very much concerned by social impact, right? So, and they are very much concerned, at least many of them, most of them, I would say, by sustainable development and inclusive development, right? So this is something that is extremely important. We need to be able to explain to them that by investing, for instance, by creating jobs, by ensuring that they respect environmental norms and standards, they are contributing not only to a better local economic development and a sustainable development at the subnational level, but they are also will benefit from the impact of their strategic investments and the impact of the way they are producing, right? So it's all about ensuring that these private actors are well engaged from the beginning, that they are part of this vision at the subnational level, that of course they see where they will get their economic gains, but we should also be able to articulate beyond the economic gain, immediate economic gain, what is the social impact of their investment. So I think this is how I would like to respond to this question, Christian. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And I guess perhaps there's time for another question, Ms. Yang, because there's a question
we
I'd
have
like
more
to...
time. Yeah.
Perfect.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. The Patrick was talking to. Should I continue?
Yes, please continue while we are waiting for the questions to be tabled later, Christian. Sorry, the floor is yours. Mr. Shea, over to you.
Okay. I'm still struggling to, do you hear me?
Can't hear you clearly now.
Is my presentation is visible?
Not yet.
Would you like us to share the presentation?
Yeah, please share the IT share.
Just let me do it. Is it there?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry for my connection and all. So I'm jumping into what Pakistan has done so far. In 2015, Pakistan committed that we would achieve SDGs by 2030. As far as the policy coherence is concerned, Pakistan integrated SDGs into national development agenda through unanimous resolution by the National Assembly of Pakistan. In 2016, we have got maps into action for implementation of SDGs across the country. In 2018, we have got national SDGs framework developed so that we could have a vision, plan, and strategy to localize the full potential of SDGs in the country.
We lost you again, Dr. Shea. So probably what we can do, Christian, are you still around? So maybe you can go for a second question while waiting for him.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Yang. So I'd like to direct a question to Bernadia. And this question is coming from Tulasi Sharan Sigdel, who is asking regarding SDG localization. I think tremendously depends on capacity of subnational governments and coordination between federal, central, subnational governments. Would you talk more on the strategies for better coordination and enhancing the capacity of subnational governments for achieving the SDGs? So this question is for you, Bernadia, please.
Thank you very much. Just a suggestion for the previous speaker, maybe he can switch on the video. Switch off the video so that maybe you can have a better connection. Just a suggestion.
Oh yes, you're right. Good suggestion.
Yeah, then you can a little smoother. Anyway, thank you for the questions. Indeed, what important for local governments is that they have to. He's going to continue.
Should I?
Maybe you answer this question first, and I over to Dr. Shea.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Please,
Yeah,
over to
thank you very much. Yes, indeed, I think it's important because local governments in every country understand the role and responsibility. Like in the case of Indonesia, the integration of SDGs actually is in the hand of the provincial governments. But many local governments pay attention and also become interested in this. Coordination can be done through different ways, through this campaign, for example, and also through creation of the task force. And in the case of climate resilience, several cities also created task force on climate resiliency to improve the coordination. So this is also has been done by several local governments. But the important is that providing the platform and also providing the system that works, meaning that because in the case of Indonesia, there is also a good coordination through different stakeholders or local actors through this participatory planning as well as participatory and local actions development. So every country is different on this, but creation of the task force, creations on the certain units looking at different sectors, because SDGs are not only dealing with one or two sectors, that is crucial. But again, important also having trust, not only with for horizontal stakeholders arrangement, but also having a very clear on the mandates of each local governments. I hope that's answered. Yes. Back to you, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that is a nice answer. I over to Dr. Shea. Are you there? Could you take us through your presentation? Dr. Shea? Okay, no response. So let's just go through another comments. Yeah, questions. Over to Christian.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Yang. And thanks, Benadia, for answering the question. I have another question for Dr. Vivi, and this question is coming from Kuntum Meladi. Oh, it's not here anymore. So perhaps again a question to you, Benadia, based on your experience, and this question is from Kuntum Melati. What are the main challenges to monitoring and evaluating the progress of SDGs at the local level?
You want me
Back to you, Benadia. Yeah, please.
Oh, you want me to answer first? Okay.
Yes.
I think the challenge, of course, data, and because it's very difficult to understand the progress if there is no good data or specific data, and this can be used as a baseline, and we see this also a big challenge of local governments, but also in the capacity for them to monitor the progress itself. And I think depending on the places, local governments, sometimes they have to also pick the priorities and also take these certain targets based on the needs of their city. So this is also what we see could be a challenge in terms of capacity for them in monitoring this. But data I consider as the most important aspects in doing the monitoring, because we normally have a standard of monitoring, we have a system of monitoring. So again, I think what this could be a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get more data. Let's get Q&A straight now.
Yeah,
until maybe Dr. Shea, could you just wait? Let's get the questions of the three speakers first, because your internet seems still not very stable.
Should I jump?
Yeah. So Christian,
okay.
Yeah, your internet is still not,
Okay.
I can't hear you clearly.
Yep.
So let's go for Q&A first. and then we can back to you for your slides.
Okay, thank you, Ms.
Can you
Yang.
hear me now?
I have another question here coming in for Patrick. And this question is coming from Neil Webster. Neil is asking how national government officials, elected and administrative, can be brought into a constructive partnership with their local government counterparts. Often there is competition and even mistrust between these groups when seeking to introduce and implement decentralization reforms. So, Patrick, I would like to direct this question to you. Are you there?
This is not the easiest question. I see my colleague Bernardia smiling when you were raising this question. Yes, we know. I mean, there's often situations where there's a certain level of competition and maybe also mistrust sometimes between central and local government. But if you go back to the 4+1 enablers that I've mentioned earlier, the first one is about policy coherence, and under policy coherence, the importance of clear fiscal decentralization policies. I think, the more clear those fiscal decentralization policies and legal frameworks are, the better the chance for a constructive collaboration between central and local government. As I said, in this region, we still have a number of countries where the functional assignments remains unclear, right? So there's a policy that says, yeah, the country is decentralized and subnational governments will have more devolved functions, but then when it comes to unpacking what those devolved functions are, there's still a certain level of unclarity. Same with the fiscal relations, right? So we need to be able to continue to work on this space to clearly articulate what all those functions are, right? So that the roles and responsibilities between central and local are clear. I mean, of course, there's this whole issue of revenues, of sharing revenues, right? So you have national tax, but often local governments, collect those tax and then basically allocate those tax at central government. Or there's also this issue of those tax being kept at subnational level and creating also some tension between central and local. So again, those are the issues that need clarity these days. And unless you really unpack those issues, you will not get the enabling environment and the level of cooperation that you're really looking for. Thanks, Christian. I don't know if I've answered, but I think those are some of the bottlenecks that we see.
Yeah,
Thanks,
let's
Patrick.
continue with more questions. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Yang, thank you. Thanks, Patrick, also for answering this difficult question. There's a question which Dr. Vivi already answered, but I'd like her to come back also to this question. It's a question of quantum, and she was asking, in developing the SDGs action plan, does the government conduct any analysis to identify trade-offs between the SDGs, and has this included in prioritizing SDGs? And Dr. Vivi, I know you have already answered in written form, but I'd like to give you the word on that again to explain it a little bit further. Please, Dr. Vivi.
And to save time, Christian, could you also maybe read out 2 to 3 questions together to Dr. Vivian, if there's any? I can't see it here. And then so she can answer same, together. I think that will save some time. Thank you.
Yes, but I think it's the only question directed to her for the moment. Perhaps there are other questions coming in. I will be monitoring that. So please, Dr. Vivi.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. In the action plan, actually, we don't have an analysis to identify the trade-off per se. Instead, we try to align all the programs from the governments and also other platform or stakeholders into the SDGs goals and targets up until the indicators in order to be monitored as well as financed well. Yeah. If we know that there is a gap, then we should try how to how to fill in the gap on those finance, and if there are some innovative way in order to catch up or accelerate, we could discuss with other stakeholder in this particular programs or goals. Yeah. We do have the analysis of the interlinkages between the goals in the roadmap, because the roadmap provide the steps and also challenges to move ahead toward the 2030. The interlinkages analysis actually provide us with some trade-off between targets and goals as that we should aware and find a solution, including also to fill in the gap for the finance. Particularly the caveat, I mean, the trade-off is on the finance to prioritize, yeah, which need to move ahead compared to others. So all these instruments that I mentioned, the action plan, the roadmap, the monitoring and evaluation guidelines, and also the metadata of all the indicators need to be utilized with all stakeholders in order to really follow not only how to programming, but also to measure and then mitigate the problem, and how to fill in the gap of the and also the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bibi. I have another set of questions to you, Patrick, and I'd like to summarize a little bit. The first one is related to the role of youth playing in the SDG localization. So strategy and its correlation with Youth 2030 in the democratic context of Asia and Pacific, especially in Southeast, where young people currently constitutes the large portion of the population, and its potential for the acceleration of the SDG implementation. So that's the first question regarding the role, the youth and their role on acceleration, the SDG implementation. And the second question for you, Patrick, is a quick question. Do we have a uniform comprehensive baseline data, or at least guidelines in generating baseline data with which referencing will be made in the localization work? So both questions, one is of Stevie Harrison and the second one is from Maria Ana Pulido. So Patrick, I hand over to you.
Thanks, Christian. Let me answer the first one. I'm not sure I've understood fully the second one. On youth, I mean, clearly, again, you know, multi-stakeholder partnerships, we've mentioned that as one of the 4+1 enablers, right? Again, we need to be very clear of the importance of young people in shaping their local development, but also, you know, engaging with them, not only, you know, going beyond the way we've been working with youth for many, many years. I mean, we now clearly know the power of young people in changing our lives. We've seen how they've been, you know, involved and how they are shaping changes when it comes to climate change, when it comes to sustainable development and sustainable production patterns, right? So young people have this force to be able to advocate, to make their voice very strongly heard. But beyond that, what is very important is that we really make sure that they are part of this whole vision that we're trying to set at the subnational level, right? Again, I'm going back to this social innovation platform, those space where you're looking at bringing together segments of the population that can make a change, right? So in the case of UNDP, let me mention here, for instance, we have a regional program that works on youth, youth empowerment, youth entrepreneurship, right? Looking at youth as agent of change, working with young people to basically better understand what they need, right? But also how they can contribute to local economic development. And from there, providing them with the tools, the skills, we call that the 21st century skills, to be able to either act as citizens stronger than they actually do, or even really be, you know, strong actors of development, right? So we have incubation for them. We're helping them connect to markets. We are bringing their ideas into connection with local governments and the private sector. And there's another very interesting work that we do within UNDP is youth engagement with parliamentarians. How do we make sure that we bring the youth closer to the parliamentarian work, either at local or national level, right? Creating those platforms, either direct connections between young people and parliamentarians, challenging parliamentarians, but also creating space, including with digital tools, to be able to have those young people articulate and engage with parliamentarians at all levels of the country. So that's for the first question. I'm not sure I've understood the second question, Christian.
Yeah, I quickly repeat it. It's about comprehensive baseline data. If there is a uniform process or at least guidelines in how to generate baseline data to help to have a reference for the localization work.
Right. I mean, I'm going to give here quite a global, answer here, Christian. I mean, clearly, if you look at the SDG targets, you can easily, countries have already done this exercise, and Indonesia is one of the countries, together with Pakistan, by the way, that really in this region led that process, right? Trying to cascade national indicators at the local level. So the moment you cascade those indicators from national to local, you get those baseline at the subnational level, right? You know what you're trying to monitor. The real problem that we have, and this is a question that was already raised by other panelists, is really how the lack of capacities to collect those indicators, because many of those indicators, I would say, stop at the level of a district. You don't go beyond that. And that's the problem that we have with only looking at national statistics and national statistic baseline, because then you basically do not have that level of data that you look. Dr. Vivi mentioned that in the case of Indonesia, the country is now going beyond district to go to village level. Imagine at that level, you even have less data. And you can not ask national statistics offices to really go granular at that level. So you need to be able to complement those source of information, those source of data with additional mechanisms to collect and data. Of course, we need to have solid statistical methodology, but I do think, and I think this is a really interesting discussion we're going to have on day 3, is how do we complement those national statistics so that we build those baseline at the local level. Thanks, Christian.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patrick. I think you reminded us we need to concentrate on the policy pillar today in our session 1. So maybe I now give the floor to Dr. Shea. Are you back? So meantime, we will just look at the comments which are relating to policy front. Then we will read it out to panelists before we do closing. So over to you, Dr. Shea.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. So I'm quickly summarize what I was sharing with you people. The institutional development, in terms of institutional development, parliamentary task force on SDGs in the national and provincial parliaments set up, some committee of National Economic Council for SDGs at the national level set up, project board having representation from the subnational governments have been set up to synchronize the policy coherence, provincial steering technical committees in all provinces, SDGs support unit level have been set up. So this is a journey of the province of Sindh, and 2016, like government of Pakistan, the government of Sindh committed, we have got SDG support unit established. We prioritize SDGs. This is very interesting to share with you all that the subnational government of Sindh prioritize SDGs. Then we have thematic and subcommittees, sub-thematic committees on sectoral basis. We got baseline established, completed. We have got SDGs framework launched in 2020. That is very recent, but we have done it. So just to re-emphasize what prioritization is all about, what we did at subnational level, keeping in mind the severity of development issues and challenges, resource availability, economic and social endowments, value for money, magnitude of impact, keeping in mind the consultation with the stakeholders, we prioritize goal 3, 4, 6, 2, 7, and 8 as the prioritized goals to be achieved by 2025. The cross-cutting was the 1, 5, and 13. We established SDGs framework, and that framework would serve as a roadmap for mainstreaming and localization of SDGs, enabling institutions and stakeholders to achieve the immediate, medium, and long-term prioritized SDGs. The framework are also purposed as a resource for development partners, civil society, academia, other stakeholders involved in implementing and monitoring SDGs at local level. This is actually the framework we follow. Mainstreaming, acceleration, and a policy support. There's a map we follow. The pillar 1, 2, 3, 4 panelists talked about. I do not repeat. The kind of vertical coherence and the horizontal policy coherence achieve institutional coordinating mechanism to foster partnership and coordination across level, because Pakistan has got multi-level governance system, and we have got horizontal policy coherence, formal partnership and coordination across sector lines, ministries, and agencies. We all know, and Yan must know because she's in Pakistan, that
Dr. Shay, are you muted? We can't hear you. IT, could you check Dr. Shay's connection? He's still there?
Hi, Dr. Shay. I can see your mic moving. Can you mute and unmute? Let's see if that will solve the problem. Now kindly unmute. Dr. Shay, kindly unmute.
apologies again. I'm very sorry for my, internet connection. I'm back. Should I continue to complete?
Yes, continue. Of course, continue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just quickly summarizing what I was telling. There's localization SDGs at the local level. Local level means here, because we have got a local government system. That system has a 3-tier governance system. We have got system at district level, taluka level, and a union council level. In last year's VNR, we presented Islam Code as a SDGs compliant taluka, and see the difficulties we faced. For example, the SDGs target 6.1, which demands safely managed access for all to safe drinking water, measured through the proportion of population that is using an improved drinking water source. That is, look at it on the premise piped power water. When we talk about the safely managed access, it does not always mean that the piped water is a safe access to safe drinking water. So geography of certain areas, for example, Islam code, proved particularly challenging for such an intervention. So that involves CapEx and OpEx cost. And there's a huge cost if we lay down the pipeline there in order to have safely managed access for all to safe drinking water. What we did, the innovation, we talk about innovation is the fourth pillar of the maps. And that helps understand that we could innovate locally. And we cannot, if we do not focus on the lowest rung in the local government system. So way forward is what is happening is that local government, that we always all talked about it. The innovation solution for domestic
We lost you again, Dr. Shea.
Eliza, can you share his presentation in his behalf? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carlos.
We are saving his bandwidth. Eliza will share his presentation.
Okay. Maybe in the meantime, Christina, could you check the additional comments going to be shared with us?
Thanks, Yang. There are already some of the question answered directly by our panelists. Thank you for that. There's one question I like to take up. It's a rather general question, and it's from Workin Shatusime, and he's asking how the SDG localizing or cascading debate is influenced by existing institutions, and I try to interpret here a little bit how localizing or the SDG localizing debate is also helping to change institutions and to influence them in their development and improvement. So this is a question, and perhaps to all of the speakers, I'd like to direct this question and ask who is willing to jump in here and provide a first idea. So how is SDG localizing influencing existing institutions?
Maybe I ask Vivek because she has this experience in dealing with even village level. So what are the benefits from the subnational and local level government in these exercises? How they are benefiting from this SDG alignment and SDG localization? Dr. Vivi, over to you.
So the question, I'm sorry, the question is how to align the SDGs at the local level?
I think the question is more on from the local, national, subnational government and local level. How are they getting the benefit from these exercises? How do they see it? Yeah, basically that's a much broader question. Thank you.
Yeah. So the alignment happened in the point for the next 5 years. Yeah. The alignment done through their midterm development plan at the local level, and then we identify which program that can be supported for certain goals. So it's translated from their midterm development plan into the action plan. within the action plan, we can elaborate it further, all those programs into the real activities. And then we identify also who are the partners and how much the program costs, and then also the targets for sure, and what kind of indicators that we're gonna achieve. On the implementations in the in the annual plan, all those programs are translated into projects, as well as the finance for sure for each project. Yeah, that's for the government side. We also collaborate with partners, for example, the CSR coming from the businesses. And then on the implementation, somehow those CSRs also work together with the CSOs for the disseminations or for the activities. That's the thing that need to be reported, monitor and then reported further. By the end, we analyze the gap and seek the solutions, how to fill in the gap. Usually the gap is on the finance, because we somehow know about the goals and the target that we're going to achieve, and then how to fit all those the output level, going toward the same goals or targets. But then where the money comes from, that's the things that we try to find further collaborations, like I mentioned on the innovative finance. We just launched the SDGs bond. That's another instrument for the finance. It's for the international bonds. The money will goes to the Ministry of Finance, that can be used for any activities that can be measured as an achievement for the SDGs. I hope it could explain.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vivi. I think throughout all these SDG alignment exercises, the local government capacities are being built, and then so they are sharing the same shared perspectives. Then they also be benefiting the funding from the national government, if the national government is going to issue the bonds like you are talking about. And then they are also benefiting to fulfill their basic requirement, which is servicing the local public sector services. That's their responsibilities. So these are how we see the local government are being incentivized to provide the policy alignment and capacity building along the way. So because resources are scaled, so we need to be more focused along the same policy alignment, and then also building the capacity along the way. So I'm asking Christian, given the time, we are almost 6 p.m. How about other questions? Should we still have a couple of minutes left before I conclude the session?
And should I come in and share something?
Sure, please.
Actually, I was talking about Islam Code. We presented Islam Code as a SDGs compliant taluka. Unfortunately, as we talked about the local government system, we don't have a third tier of local government system in Pakistan operationalized in a way that should be, as we all understand that what happened in 2000 when Musharraf government was there, the decentralization was one of the norm of the governance system in Pakistan. The system was rolled out, but what we did, we innovated something new. We did it that we declared Islam Code as SDGs compliant talqa, and we planned and we strategized how to do it. That's a classic example of the localization. What we did, we engaged the Third Development Foundation, it's a private sector. We engaged with them. We together carried out baseline of Islam Code. We came up with the idea that we could have Islam Code as SDGs compliant by 2038. Unfortunately, we can't do it by 2030. So that is a classic example that we planned, and accordingly, subsequently, what we did, we have Islam Code Development Master Plan in place, and that actually serves as a roadmap how to go about it. As a lady from Indonesia shared, that the financing was the huge challenge. So SMAC and other partners at the local level were engaged to have Islam Code as a SDGs compliant talqa. It's a classic example of public-private partnership at local level. Thank you very much.
That's a very good addition, Dr. Shea, on mobilizing the private sector participants to this. Given the time, maybe let me summarize this afternoon's panel one. Let me first thank all the panelists for your excellent contribution. I'd like to summarize in a way of girl, boy, girl, boy. So I hope the boys are fine with this order. So the first I'm talking about Dr. Bernardia. Dr. Bernardia highlighted that localizing SDG is a iterative process from involvement of subnational governments in identifying priorities, developing the strategies, and in the implementation to create for local ownership. So the local ownership is absolutely essential. She also highlights the importance of the VSR and the VLR, meaning voluntary subnational reviews and voluntary local reviews, and making the localization an essential part of national strategies. Thank you very much, Belandia. Second, on Patrick stressed that subnational goals needs to really function in a coordinated manner with clear decentralization process, functional assignment and resources aligned to those functions. So the accountability he highlighted has to be very clear. So he also shared that platforms that will allow the citizens and stakeholders to share their concerns, that is critical, and localizing of SDG is important to align the 2030 agenda of leaving no one behind. I think that is also highlighted at the beginning by our Bangkok UNDP hub at his opening remarks, Dr. Jekyll. So that leaving no one behind should be always remembered. Now I come to Dr. Vivi. Dr. Vivi highlights the importance of political will, strong legal basis, and good strategy for the implementation and localization of SDGs. She also highlighted some of the perspectives of prospective platforms and related platform for stakeholders engagement, such as academia institutions, SDG centers, media, private sector. And then it's very interesting to see how Indonesia is going to even cascading the SDG further down to the village level, given the complex geographic challenges. And there are also a lot of islands involved. So this experience is very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Vivi. Last but not least, Dr. Shea highlighted how the government of Pakistan integrated SDGs into its national development agenda to really support localization. Even because of the difficulties of the local government structure, they still find a way to cascading down the goals, SDG goals, to the localized level in a way to build the capacity to support the SDG alignment. With this, I over to Rashana for you to close the session. Thank you, Rashana. Thank you, everyone, for a fantastic discussion, and your support is very important because it's quite late now in Manila, and we still got a lot of participants interested in this topic. Over to you, Rashana. Thank you so much. By the way, Rashana is one behind the scene. She's expert in grouping everybody together for this whole week SDG series roundtable. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiaohong. Yes, I just want to just say that this is not over. Today is our first day of the series of roundtables. So today we focused on institutional strengthening policy coherence. So we have 3 more panels, panel discussions. Tomorrow we'll be discussing another enabler for SDG localization, which is financing. Then on the 3rd day, we will discuss the importance of data management and monitoring for localizing SDGs. And at the end, we will discuss the multi-stakeholder engagement, partnerships, and knowledge. So we do have very encouraging panel members who would share with us their views. So please do join us tomorrow and other days as well. So thank you so much with this. I thank everyone for the time and attention. Thank you so much. Bye.
So with this, thank you so much. I don't think we have done the photo taking. Do you want to do it now or we do it tomorrow or how do you want to do it?
Did it I think in the opening session, Xiaohong, so we just did it without actually even announcing. Maybe we should have done that, but we did take some pictures in the beginning. So thanks a lot.
Okay, you already done that. Great, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening to everyone. Hope you will be much more excited tomorrow and looking forward to see all of you tomorrow. A very good evening to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, our
Thank you very much.
panelists.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Xiaohong. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid.